Well, it is good to see everybody here this morning. We got a good crowd. We got some visitors here, some people I have just met for the first time, and so I'm thankful that you are here with us. I want to go ahead and cut to the chase here. I'm going to talk about something this morning that ends up usually just being controversial anywhere I go. So there's a heads up on that. It's not controversial because it's not easy to understand. It's controversial because, by and large, people just don't want to do it. Now, I'm going to just throw this out here right from the beginning. I don't get up here and preach these things because I want to make you angry. I don't want to do that. Now, I love everybody here. I don't want to upset anybody. Man, I like us just being one big happy family. And so I don't want to do that. I don't want to upset anybody. I don't get up here and preach these things because I have everything down. Because I know that there are certain things that I preach that I don't have down, that I know that I need just as well as anybody else. I don't come up here on some kind of a high horse thinking that, well, I'm going to look down my nose at everybody because I've got this figured out and they don't. That's not where I'm at today. Matter of fact, the subject I'm talking about today, I have struggled with in the past, primarily in my youth, and so I understand this very, very well. But you know, we need to teach on these things. Now, I want to before we jump into the lesson itself, I want to introduce why we talk about things like this. Yeah, I know you're going, well, what are we talking about? I'm not telling you just yet, but what's the reason that we do this? Open up your Bibles to Ezekiel chapter 3. This is why we do this. Ezekiel chapter 3. Now, this is really speaking to Ezekiel here, but we're going to start in verse 17 and look at a few verses here. Ezekiel 3, verse 17 and following. It says, Son of man, I have made thee a watchman unto the house of Israel. Therefore, hear the word at my mouth, and give them warning from me. Do you hear that? Give them warning from me. When I say unto the wicked, thou shalt surely die, and thou givest him not warning, nor speakest to warn the wicked from his wicked way, to save his life, the same wicked man shall die in his iniquity. But his blood will I require at thy hand. Yet if thou warn the wicked, and he turn not from his wickedness, nor from his wicked way, he shall die in his iniquity, but thou hast delivered thy soul. Again, when a righteous man doth turn from his righteousness and commit iniquity, and I lay a stumbling block before him, he shall die, because thou hast not given him warning. He shall die in his sin, and his righteous deeds which he hath done shall not be remembered, but his blood will I require at thy hand. Nevertheless, if thou warn the righteous man, that the righteous sin not, and he doth not sin, he shall surely live, because he took warning, and thou hast delivered thy soul. Did you get all that? You know, why is it that the preacher needs to get up and teach on subjects that are not always easy subjects? You know, I've been accused of this before, and they'll say, well, you know what, you need to teach more about, love, peace, joy, and love, and those things need to be taught. But if I leave out the warnings, you know what I do? I am in the process of condemning you, and I condemn myself at the same time. But if I warn, and I warn you, I lovingly warn you, and you turn away, then we're both saved. If I warn you and you're doing something and you don't turn away, I've at least saved myself. And so I think that that's a big, big thing to remember here. I'm doing this as much for me as I am for you. Now, furthermore, I want to state this. I love you. And I don't know who all this applies to, because I don't go around trying to find out who is doing what. I would really rather not know who is doing what. And so if you think, well, Matt's specifically talking to me this morning, that's you saying that, that's not me. I'm not speaking directly to anybody. I know that this subject is something that we need to understand all together. And that's, this, There's a lot of good congregations out there that will never teach on this subject. And so I want to do that today. I want to save our souls today. And so let's look at the subject of modesty. So did God define modesty? I don't have the PowerPoint up here for some reason. In Joshua 1 and verse 8, this was the passage before, it says, "This book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate thereon day and night, that thou mayest observe to do according to all that is written therein. For then thou shalt make thy way prosperous, and then thou shalt have good success." Going throughout the law of God, when you look at what is going on throughout time concerning law, you start off and you have the patriarchal law. And that goes for a long time. And then you have the Mosaic law. And then, of course, now we have the Christian age here. We have we're under the law of Christ. And so there are some differences in the law. And the law has changed throughout these three dispensations. But there is such thing as moral law as well. Guess what the difference is between moral law and the rest of these things that we've already discussed? See, these laws have changed. There's a change when the patriarchal law switched over to the Mosaic. There was a change there. There's a change when the Mosaic law switched over. Now we have this Christian age. There's a change in all these things. Now, of course, the Scriptures are replete with examples of things that are mentioned about the fact that the old law and the new law and the differences therein. And there are differences in the law. The law has changed, but moral laws do not change. In Romans 12, verses 1 and 2, it says, "I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service. And be not fashioned according to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is the good and acceptable and perfect will of God." In 1 Timothy 2 and verse 9, it says, "In like manner, that women adorn themselves in modest apparel, with shamefacedness and sobriety, not with braided hair and gold or pearls or costly raiment." And so here is the question. Now, I want to say this because I just realized what happened. I did not give the PowerPoint to them, so that we don't have a PowerPoint this morning. So I apologize for that. It's not their fault. It's mine. But what is going on here? What is modesty? This is a big thing. What is meant by modest apparel? Now, the word here, it says to adorn in 1 Timothy 2 and verse 9. To adorn means to arrange. And then modest means observing the proprieties of sex, chaste, and things that are decent. And so we got to think about these things and try to figure out what it is that the Bible says on this. Now, this is the problem that we come across whenever it comes to this. I don't know how many times that I have been in a conversation with somebody about this, and they'll say, well, we need to be modest. And they'll say that. A lot of people will say that, but they don't actually define that. And they'll say, well, I don't know. There's no definition in the Bible. Well, you know what? That's further from the truth. There is a definition in the Scripture. We're gonna look at that today. Since we don't have a PowerPoint, I'll try to go a little bit slower on these verses so that you can go to them. In Genesis chapter 3, if you'd like to turn over to Genesis chapter 3, in Genesis chapter 3, we see some interesting things here. Now, we're not going to look at the entirety of Genesis chapter 3. Maybe we'll do this at a later date. But in Genesis chapter 3, of course, this is the fall of man. And what do? They sin. And when they sin, they realize something right off the bat. And that is what? You remember that? What do they realize first thing? We are naked. Their eyes are opened, and they realize we're not wearing any clothes. And so then it says that they go and they make for themselves aprons, they've basically what they've done is they have covered what you would see like maybe a modern bathing suit would cover. They're covering their privates probably here, but that's about it. And then in verse 21, you see that God comes along, and all this being said, kind of cutting this short, God comes along and says, who told you you were naked? And they said, well, we ate of the tree. And of course he realizes all that. But in verse 21, it talks about the fact that God then makes them coats of skin. And the Hebrew word here is a word that means a long shirt-like garment, generally with sleeves that covered from their shoulders to their knees. And so this is the very first time, and you may actually, I believe it's the King James Version, says tunics of skin. A tunic covers the same area from the neck to the knees. And this is the very first time that we see anything about nakedness, and this is or modesty here. And God's moral standard does not change throughout time. This is the first time we see it, but we can back this up throughout the rest of the Scripture. Okay, look at this. Look at Exodus 28. We got a couple of passages in Exodus we'll look at. In Exodus 28 and verse 42. Exodus 28 and verse 42. This is speaking of the priest. It says, "And thou shalt make them linen breeches to cover the flesh of their nakedness. From the loins even unto the thighs they shall reach." And so what is to be covered here? This is, an undergarment, if you will, linen breeches. This is, kind of akin to like maybe a, kind of like a boxer brief to give some kind of an example here. But this is a longer garment that would kind of go down the leg. It wasn't just up around the private area. This would go from the waist all the way down to the knee. When you look at linen breeches, man, I have a picture of this. I wish I had gotten this PowerPoint together. I'm so sorry about that. But you can see the priest wore this. Now let's look at another passage here in Exodus 20, verse 26. Go a couple of pages back in your Bible. Exodus 20 and verse 26 says, "Neither shalt thou go up by steps unto mine altar, that thy nakedness be not uncovered thereon." Now, this one, if you are not familiar, you look at this and you don't, the average man probably doesn't really realize what is going on here. But some study gives you a little bit better understanding. And that is that, ladies are going to understand this better than men. Men, we wear pants here in the U.S. At least you're supposed to, I guess. Some men may not, but we wear pants. And the idea though is that when a woman walks up steps, what happens when she walks up steps and she's wearing a dress? Well, she's got to watch out, because every time she lifts up her knee, her dress is gonna fly up a little bit. And if you're wearing something that is going down to the knee, then there's a possibility that anything above the knee could be shown. And the idea in this passage is that this is nakedness. And so why would you have a ramp instead? Well, a ramp is going to be a more gradual incline. And so as you're walking up, the same thing is not going to happen. It's not going to happen to that kind of a degree. And so, therefore, your nakedness shall not be revealed. All right. Let's turn to Isaiah chapter 47. Isaiah 47, verses 2 through 3. Isaiah 47, verse 2, it says, "Take the millstones and grind meal, remove thy veil, strip off the train, uncover the leg." You may have a translation that says, uncover the thigh, which is the correct translation. Pass through the rivers, thy nakedness shall be uncovered, yea, thy shame shall be seen. I will take vengeance and will spare no man. Okay, so this is not specifically, the whole point here is not talking about modesty, but it gives us a glimpse here. It gives us a definition. So take the millstones, grind the mill, remove the veil, strip off the train, uncover the thigh, and pass through the rivers. Now, it was a common thing that if you were wearing a garment like they wore at this time, that if you were going to cross over some water, and you'll see this to a lesser degree when there's a woman wearing a long dress and you might have a puddle and she'll pick up her dress just a little bit and walk across that puddle as to not get her dress wet. Well, the same thing is what's being described here, except what they're saying is, look, you're going to have to wade across the river. What are you going to have to do? You're going to have to pull up your garment, and you're going to have to uncover the leg to do this. But they're saying looking at this, it's the nakedness shall be uncovered. Their thigh is associated with nakedness here. 1 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 9. And so if you first of all, the first thing we've already mentioned is that and you're looking at the thigh is nakedness. All right. 1 Timothy 2:9. In like manner, the women adorn themselves in modest apparel with shamefacedness and sobriety, not with braided hair and gold or jewels or costly raiment. Going back to this passage, the word apparel is from a Greek word that means to send down. Some of the Greek women wore their robes open on each side from the bottom up above the knee so as to discover a part of the thigh. These were termed discoverers of the thigh, but it was, in general, only the young girls or modest women who wore them thus. And so these are things that are being considered as this is being written. In John 21 and verse 7, though, we're going to see something else about modesty that hasn't been mentioned. Some of this kind of goes without saying, but then, with this one in particular, it is both for men and women, but, this is the hard part about this. Sometimes when I've taught this, women feel like they've been attacked. And you know what? For me, that's actually it's actually really good. I'm preaching it this time because guess what? Now men are wearing short shorts. I don't even get that. Okay, I don't even understand that. But men are now wearing short shorts these days, and it's just I can't. This is one of those things where I'm like, can you not afford pants, guys? I mean, I don't understand. But anyway. Men now are wearing short shorts, and so this is just as much to them as anybody else. But the Scriptures calls this out in another regard. We would understand that if a woman were to walk around shirtless, that she would definitely be immodest, right? But then, men will go, well, you know what, I can walk around shirtless. I'm not made the same way that a woman is. But does the Bible describe it that way? In John 21 and verse 7, let's look at that. John 21 and verse 7 says, That disciple, therefore, whom Jesus loved, saith unto Peter, It is the Lord. So when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he girt his coat about him, for he was naked, and cast himself into the sea. And so, what is he wearing here? He is probably wearing these linen breeches that we've already described. And he had been wearing a tunic, but he is out fishing. He's with the guys. He's away from the shore, and effectually he's got his shirt off. Now, all right, I'm going to go ahead and head this one off at the pass because I have had so many guys get upset and say, well, it says that he was naked. And so here we go. I'm just going to be really up front. I've been fishing a lot. If I had a fishing buddy like this that was naked in the boat, guess what I'm never doing again? I'm never going fishing with him again, okay? Mark my words. That's not, no, I don't know anybody who would do that. You're weird if you would like that. No, but have you ever been out in the boat with another man? Guys, have you ever been out in a boat with another man and it's hot and you take your shirt off? That happens, but nobody's going to be out there, just completely in the nude. That is, you're looking for a different fishing buddy at that point, okay? I know some guys I've talked to you about going fishing. Please, mark my words on that one, okay? We're not going fishing if that's the way you go fishing. But that's just clearly not what's going on. The idea here is that he's just practically not wearing a shirt. And so when he's going to go and he wants to go and be with the Lord, when he sees the Lord on the shore, what does he do? He puts his coat back on. So he's putting basically it's like his shirt back on, but this is, the whole robe going down to the knees. He throws that back on, and then he casts himself into the sea and he swims to shore. All right, so according to all the passages that we've seen this morning, going all the way back to the very first time that God clothed his children, Adam and Eve, in the garden, he covered them from the neck to the knees, and then throughout the Bible, when you see nakedness, something is being uncovered from the neck to the knees. And that is the definition of nakedness. Now, I don't think I have to. If you think I need to, I will go through and do this. But I don't believe I have to go through and tell you that you should not be naked in front of people, right? I think that goes without saying. But if I need to go and define that more, let me know, and I'll do that at a later date. All right, here's the next point. Can apparel identify one's heart? And the quick answer to that is, well, yeah. The way that you dress certainly can reflect what is in your heart. Proverbs 7 and verse 10. Proverbs 7:10. Let's start there. Proverbs 7 and verse 10. It says, "And behold, there met him a woman with the attire of a harlot and wily of heart." And so here's the thing is you can wear the attire of a harlot. What does that mean? You're going to wear the attire of someone who's trying to entice someone sexually. That's the idea. Now, kind of a funny thing, there's a comedian years ago. I'm sure there's a lot of bad stuff in this, but this was before I was a Christian that I even saw this. But this comedian made fun of the fact that women will dress in this way and then be offended by the advances of men. And he said a woman came up to him and said, "You think because I dress this way that I'm easy?" And he was kind of like, "Well, yeah, that's exactly what I thought." And then he did a sketch later on where he was walking around New York City dressed as a cop, and people came up and they would ask him where something was, or "Excuse me, officer," and he'd turn around all offended. "You think because I'm dressed this way that I'm a police officer?" And he would act like he was all offended. That is how ridiculous, though, it really is. I mean, when a woman dresses in the attire of a harlot, and to expect, different treatment than what she gets from men is pretty ludicrous. In Matthew 5, verses 27 and 28, it says, "Ye have heard that it was said, Thou shalt not commit adultery. But I say unto you, that everyone that looketh on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart." So, this is another thing that I've heard about this. When the argument that sometimes I hear from women is, "You know what? I'm going to dress the way I want to dress. Men should not be looking." And that's true. Men shouldn't look. But neither should you cast a stumbling block in front of somebody else. In Luke 17 and verse 1, he said unto his disciples, "It is impossible, but that occasions of stumbling should come. But woe unto him through whom they come." If you are dressed immodestly and you cause someone to stumble, you have a responsibility in the matter. If you are dressed immodestly, you could cause someone to stumble, and that shows that you don't really care about other people's souls. Don't be selfish. Think about what you're wearing and whether it promotes godliness or not. Acts 19 and verse 19. I want to bring this out. If you might remember this, Joe Van Tile got up sometime this past year, and he did a talk on this. But Acts 19 and verse 19. There were a lot of people back in the first century that, of course, they were becoming Christians, and people were just not accustomed to Christianity at all. It was very new at the time, and so there were a lot of people that practiced sorcery back in those days. And you know what they did? They had a lot of things that went along with sorcery. Acts 19:19 says, "Not a few of them practiced magical arts, brought their books together, and burned them in the sight of all. And they counted the price of them and found it 50,000 pieces of silver." All right, so maybe you're thinking, okay, well, what does this have to do with the subject at hand? What is going on here? Listen, there are things, like I said, that I've struggled with myself. I've always been a fan of movies. I've liked movies and music, and I used to have a rather large DVD collection. I had, at one time, over 300 DVDs. And, as I grew as a Christian, I realized I shouldn't have some of this stuff. Some of the stuff is bad. So I started, throwing them out. I didn't take them to Goodwill. I didn't go give them to somebody else. I threw them away. Because at that point I said, well, nobody should have these. I don't need to go and give them to somebody else. Nobody should have these. These are not good. That's what these people did. They said, they're practicing magical arts. They became Christians. And they had all these expensive books. And what do? They threw them away. They burnt them. Now, if you're looking at that passage, you might ask, I wonder how much 50,000 shekels here, the pieces of silver is. How much is that? This is estimated to be over $1 million today. And over $1 million worth of these books. And they got rid of them. This was expensive. They had been practicing something that was wrong. And instead of giving these valuables away or selling them, they burned them. And, I think that there may be something to say here about this. There are things that probably we just need to throw out. They're not modest. We just need to get rid of them. But there are some things that, you could alter and make it modest. I know that's the big thing today. There's a lot of clothing out there that's real cute and whatnot, and in order for a woman to wear it and be modest, she's going to have to alter it in some kind of way. And so there's something to be said here about taking a good look at the closet and seeing what's there. So I need to bring up a few more things here in association with this. My father-in-law, years ago, ran into this issue amongst people going to various camps and whatnot, and so anyway, he wrote an article on this, and this is from this article. I've got actually something else that he gave me that I'm going to read to you. This is responses from preachers. I'll give you that at the end, but in this, he was dealing with people who were saying, it's fine, this modern swimming apparel is just fine. There's nothing wrong with it, and it's fine for anybody. But anyway, so in this, my father-in-law wrote this. He said, "The only reason that I can think of that a man would allow his family to dress immodestly and visit sinful environments are he enjoys the atmosphere himself and will sacrifice his wife and children to feed his lust, or he is not man enough to stand up to his wife and family and insist they dress godly. Neither makes sense for a normal thinking spiritual man." I've thought about this a lot, and I've tried to come up with other solutions here, and I have to agree. I don't know why anybody would do this. In times past, culture thought that it was immodest to show calves and ankles. This is another question that comes up whenever I've taught on this, and be like, "Well, yeah, Matt doesn't want to see our ankles," and they'll make all these jokes. And listen, that's not even a thing, okay? That's culture said that at one point in time. Matter of fact, so where we just moved from was West Virginia, At the very top of West Virginia, in the Wheeling area, there is a place called Bethany, and that's where Alexander Campbell lived, and he taught at the Bethany College there. And I went on a trip there many years ago, and we went into the church building. The church building was set up kind of funny. There were different steps leading up. And, it was culturally thought of at the time that, not biblically, mind you, but culturally, that, it's kind of shameful for a woman to show her ankles. So in walking up the steps, the men and women walked up different steps so that you won't be able to see their ankles. Also, there were dividers in the pews so that men could sit on one side and women could sit on another, and then therefore you wouldn't be distracted while listening to the sermons. And maybe there's some sense there sometimes, I don't know, but those are all extra stuff. It's all extra. Now, if culture dictates that we must cover more than what God says, we follow it to save those who do not understand the truth. But if society says a person is modest by wearing less than what God commands, then we must obey God rather than men. Now, I've had men tell me this, and I'm just going to, again, shoot straight on this one. There's no reason to beat around the bush here. But I've had men that will come up to me and say, well, that doesn't affect me. Now, I'm going to tell you right now that I'm going to give you the same response that I'll give them. There's only two reasons for that. Either you're a homosexual or you're lying. It affects you. It affects you. I don't know a single man that it doesn't affect. We even talked about some of that in class this morning. It affects all of us to some degree, but especially men. We've got to be careful about this. Lying to ourselves doesn't help. Lying doesn't help. We can be strong. Yeah, and maybe some people are stronger than others. But we don't need to be associated with this kind of temptation. 1 Timothy 4 verse 2, through the hypocrisy of men that speak lies, branded in their own conscience as with a hot iron. Some people have seared their own conscience to where they're not even ashamed of it anymore. Jeremiah 6 and verse 15, were they ashamed when they had committed abomination? Nay, they were not at all ashamed, neither could they blush. Therefore they shall fall among them that fall. At the time that I visit them, they shall be cast down, saith Jehovah. We need to remember this. Just because something doesn't bother you doesn't make it right with God. All are judged by the same standard. John 12 and verse 48, he that rejecteth me and receiveth not my sayings hath one that judgeth him. The word that I spake, the same shall judge him in the last day. We need to pursue righteousness. 1 Corinthians 5 verse 10. Not at all meaning with the fornicators of this world. You can't take yourself out of the world away from these people. Or with the covetous and extortioners, or with idolaters. For then must ye needs go out of the world. When you're dealing with Christians, you deal with Christians. But with the people of the world, you're not going to be able to keep yourself from this altogether. We're going to be out in public sometime. You're going to go to the grocery store. You're going to see things that you probably shouldn't. But the point is, you don't go see on purpose. That's not the meaning of all of this. Job 31 and verse 1, I made a covenant with mine eyes. How then should I look upon a virgin? I've had this, my sport, whatever sport I'm playing, that it necessitates that I wear this, that, or the other. The Olympics over the last several years, I don't watch the Olympics, but, the sexualization of the athletes has been called into question in the last few years. Not only women, but also men, because of what they're asking them to wear. And listen, if any activity calls for a person to violate God's commands, then a Christian simply should not participate. And that's it. All right. I mentioned that there were some gospel preachers and their responses. You're going to know some of these names, and so maybe you'll hear somebody that you know pretty well and hear what they said. But this is what my father-in-law did when he was talking to these people. He's a younger man, and he said, "You know what? I need some older men that have been preaching for a long time to back me up on this." And they need it. And so he wrote them, explained the whole situation, gave him some of the material that he'd given these men, and then these preachers then commented on it. And this is what he said. He says, and he in his article says this: "Is there a faithful gospel preacher among us who would defend the modern day swimming attire and the beach environment? As a younger preacher in my early 30s, several men who defended this attire and atmosphere challenged me. They consider me still green and wet behind the ears. These spiritually minded," and he puts that in quotations, "spiritually minded brethren believed we should teach modest attire, but we should not give examples of what is immodest or identify environments that promote immodest attire. They were convinced that if I were to consult older, more seasoned preachers concerning this subject, I would learn that I was only preaching my opinion. Without hesitation, I agreed and wrote several well-known gospel preachers. I informed them of the situation and asked of their input considering my conclusions. Here are excerpts from their replies. Garland Elkins from the Memphis School of Preaching wrote, "You are on solid and safe scriptural ground when you oppose immodesty. The Bible certainly teaches that immodesty is sinful. There are many defenders of immodesty, but there is no defense. Of course, the activity of swimming is not wrong, but the scant bathing suits and near nudity are indeed wrong. It is wrong to expose one's nakedness, whether in a bathing suit, shorts, or a dress, etc. It is proper to give examples of immodesty." E. Claude Gardner, President Emeritus of Freed-Hardeman University, wrote, "Some may believe that they can participate in mixed swimming without consequences, but their participation may become a stumbling block to others." Buster Dobbs, editor of the Firm Foundation, wrote, "Shamefacedness helps define the word modest. It means, among other things, bashful. A person who is timid, shy, and easily embarrassed will not expose as much flesh as an average bathing suit bears." Someone asked the question, if today's swimming attire is modest, how much more would a person have to take off to be immodest? Your position on this question is doubtless correct. Leroy Brownlow, minister, writer, and publisher, wrote, "We know that we are considering a command, 1 Timothy 2:9, and we know that the purpose of a command is to apply it and control the conduct of an individual. Why have a command if you don't apply it? Yet there are those who don't object to preaching, 1 Timothy 2:9, if you don't apply it. But if a preacher does not help the people to apply a command, what is his job?" Robert Taylor, Jr., minister and writer, wrote, "You are right in what you preached, and they should hold high your hands. You are right to name mixed swimming as a specific example of modest dress. The families there who participate in such should give it up promptly. Such is not becoming a Christian." Johnny Ramsey, minister and teacher from the Brown Trail School of Preaching, wrote, "I agree with you 100%. What you said and the applications made are needed everywhere. We must apply what we preach on any subject, and certainly on modesty in these wicked and worldly days." Hardeman Nichols, minister, wrote, "Thus, with the two terms modest and shamefacedness, this scripture commands modest apparel from a modest heart, which is rooted in a character that considers the effect of a Christian's dress upon others and would always restrain a good person from an unworthy act or appearance. In the light of the language, I believe a mature heart must reach the conclusion that the type of dress and the close proximity of both sexes in general setting of mixed swimming is forbidden by Christians. I would not be surprised if some good people do not know how to apply the principles of the Bible to many specific cases of immodesty. Since we live in such an immodest age, it would be easy for one's sensibilities to be dull. Does the scanty attire associated with swimming, where both sexes are present, war against my soul and the souls of others? I think the answer is obvious. Then God begs us to abstain from that attire that goes for both male and female alike." David Farr, minister, writer, past director of the East Tennessee School of Preaching, wrote, "In summary, of course, you are right in warning against swimming suits or anything else which provoke lust. There are times when such things need to be specifically named." Perry B. Cotham, minister, writer, missionary, wrote, "I realize in our days of loose morals, many do not have much modesty, and this is true of many members of the church. The scanty covering of the new lady's bathing suit would to me not be very modest. I do not know of any good, faithful gospel preacher who would condone or endorse such a practice." V.P. Black, minister and writer, said, "The Bible has much to say about modesty. We are living in an age when the world looks upon modesty as a joke. We as children of God should look upon modesty in the light of the Word of God and not in the light of the world. There is not anything wrong with giving examples." Winford Clark, elder, minister, author, wrote, "As to the matter of modesty, there can be no doubt that mixed swimming males and females would violate the teaching of 1 Timothy 2:9. If a swimsuit would not be immodest by Paul's definition, then it would be hard to find a garment that could be called immodest. I am sure you know that Thayer defines apparel as a lowering, a letting down. A garment let down, it seems that the background would be that of ladies who went into the fields to work and would raise their dresses and fold them into something like a belt or a girdle. Thus Paul would speak of the lowering of the garment to cover the nakedness thus exposed. One would surely have a difficult time lowering the modern attire used for swimming." Now this, of course, in the context of the bathing suit, given, and this was just one of the examples that he gave, and this is the response that was given by all these preachers. Now, I mentioned that he wrote several preachers. He actually wrote 20 preachers, and 19 of them said pretty much the same thing. We went through several of those. There was one that didn't, he wrote him purposefully, but my father-in-law also wrote Rubel Shelley. He was the only one who did not say that it was wrong. Everybody else did. Now, if you know who Rubel Shelley is, you realize immediately why he did that. Because he was in all kinds of error already. Now, look, I don't come up here preaching this saying, looking down on people. This is just something I think that hasn't been taught very well. There's been a long time that, and I tell you, I've preached at congregations and preached this very thing. Matter of fact, I preached this at one congregation, and I was laughed to scorn. Literally. They were laughing at me while I was preaching. One of the girls in the congregation, she decided that during the invitation song, she would unzip her jacket and put it behind her to show that she was wearing a crop top shirt, it's just been amazing, the response that I've gotten from this. On the other hand, though, I've gotten a lot of people that said, I just didn't know that. And man, I'm thankful that you said that, because I just had no idea. And I know at one point in time, I also had no idea, because I am just as guilty in this regard in the past as anybody else. Now, I didn't have any clue. I thought modesty was for women and not men. Really. And even when I started studying this subject on my own, that is still the thought I had for a long time, going, well, men lust more than women are going to, and so that's where the problem lies. It's not a matter of lust. It's a matter of nakedness and covering your nakedness. All right, now I know that this doesn't apply to everybody here, because I know that some people probably just go like, it's just a natural thing. I want to cover up, I don't want to show myself for various reasons. But here's the thing, we got to mention this. It's getting warm outside. It's been warm for a little while. It's getting warm outside, and this is going to be more of a temptation as the summer months come near. And you know what? If we want to be faithful children of God, we need to remember these things and make sure that we keep ourselves covered. If you are not yet a Christian and you want to make things right today and become a child of God, the invitation is yours. You need to hear, believe, repent, confess, and be baptized. Most of us in this room, I look around and see that we've done just that. And so what you need to do is make things right with God if you need to do that. If you just need some prayers, if you're struggling, want some prayers, we'll be glad to pray for you. The invitation is yours. Please come as we stand, as we sing.